August 16th, 1977. Los Angeles, California. 3:22 inches the afternoon. The phone rings in a house on Summit Drive, in Beverly Hills. It is an ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day that doesn't announce itself. No storm coming, no feeling in the air that something is about to split the world into before and after. Just August light on the pavement, traffic moving on the street below, the ordinary sounds of an ordinary afternoon. Priscilla Presley picks up the phone. She is 32 years old. She has been divorced from Elvis for 4 years. She has built a life in Los Angeles, her own apartment, her own friends, her own slowly emerging sense of who she is, outside of being the wife of the most famous man on earth. She has a daughter. Lisa Marie is 9 years old, and she is with Priscilla today, in another room of the house, and the world she knows is about to change forever. The voice on the other end of the phone belongs to Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager, his oldest friend in the Memphis Mafia, Joe Esposito, who has been with Elvis since the Army days, since Germany, since before Priscilla was anything more than a young girl at a party who caught the wrong man's attention. Joe doesn't ease into it. There is no way to ease into something like this. Priscilla, he says. Elvis is gone. The house goes very still. Those 3 words, Elvis is gone, land differently than any other 3 words in the English language could have landed at that moment. Not because Priscilla didn't know Elvis was struggling. She knew. Everyone who was close to him knew. The last time she had seen him, 2 weeks earlier, she had looked at his face and felt something cold move through her that she couldn't name. He looked like a man who was very tired. Not stage tired, not tour tired, tired in a deeper place, somewhere beneath the performance, somewhere beneath everything. But knowing something is possible and hearing that it has happened are 2 entirely different things. Priscilla says nothing for a long moment. Joe waits. He has made this call before the call that destroys someone's world, and he knows that silence, after the words, is not absence of response. It is the sound of a person reorganizing everything they understood about reality. How? Priscilla finally asks. Joe tells her what he knows, which is not much. Not yet. Elvis was found in his bathroom at Graceland. Paramedics were called. He was taken to Baptist Memorial Hospital. The doctors did everything they could. Priscilla asks, did he know? Did he know it was coming? Joe doesn't have an answer for that. She thanks him. She hangs up the phone. She stands in the kitchen of her house on Summit Drive in Beverly Hills, and she does not move for 3 minutes. This is the part nobody saw. This is the part that happened before the cameras and the reporters and the crowds that would gather outside Graceland within hours. This is the private earthquake, the one that destroys everything on the inside, while the outside stays perfectly still. Priscilla had divorced Elvis in October 1973. She had been the one to leave. That is important to understand. She left him, not the other way around. She left because she had to, because after years of being remade in Elvis's image, of dressing the way he wanted, and wearing her hair the way he preferred, and orbiting his world, without ever quite being allowed to have a world of her own, she had finally understood that staying would cost her everything she had. Left. But leaving Elvis Presley didn't mean stopping loving him. It never does. The people who knew them both in those years say that Priscilla and Elvis never fully let go of each other. They talked on the phone. They co-parented Lisa Marie with genuine care and cooperation. There were moments, private moments, away from management and lawyers and the machinery of their separate public lives, when they were simply 2 people who had known each other since she was 14 years old. Since he was a young man in Germany who looked at a quiet girl at a party like she was the only person in the room. You don't erase that. You don't divorce that. You carry it with you. Priscilla sets the phone down on the kitchen counter. She walks to the window. The Los Angeles afternoon continues outside, indifferent and ordinary. Someone is mowing a lawn 3 houses down. A car passes slowly on the street. The world doesn't know yet what she knows. For a few more minutes, she is the only person in Los Angeles who knows that Elvis Presley is dead. And in those few minutes, she allows herself to feel it. She cries. Not the composed, dignified grief that the world will see at the funeral 1 week later. Real crying. The kind that comes from the stomach, that bends you forward, that doesn't care about composure or cameras or what anyone thinks. The kind of crying that is just a body responding to an unbearable fact. She cries for about 10 minutes. Then she stops. Because there is a 9-year-old girl in the next room. Lisa Marie does not know yet. She is watching television or reading or playing with something. 9-year-olds live in their own world, sealed from the cruelty of adult reality by the simple mercy of not yet knowing what the world contains. And Priscilla has to be the one to change that. She has to walk into that room and open a door that can never be closed again. She washes her face. She looks at herself in the mirror for a long moment. She has always been the one who holds things together. In the Elvis years, she was the center of a house that was always chaos. The Memphis Mafia always there. The hangers-on, the yes men. The people who needed things from Elvis and got to Priscilla first. She learned to be steady. She learned to be the person in the room who didn't panic. She walks down the hallway to Lisa Marie's room. "Baby," she says, when she opens the door. "I need to tell you something." What Lisa Marie said in response to those words has never been made fully public. Priscilla has spoken carefully around it in interviews for 40 years, describing the moment without quite inhabiting it, keeping the most private parts private with the discipline of someone who has had to protect a child from the world since that child was born. But people who were close to Priscilla in those weeks say that Lisa Marie's response was not tears, not immediately. It was a very particular kind of 9-year-old silence, the silence of a child trying to understand something that doesn't fit inside the categories she has for understanding things. "Where did he go?" Lisa Marie asked. Priscilla told her, and then she held her, and the two of them stayed in that room for a long time. The daughter of Elvis Presley, and the woman who had loved him since she was 14, sitting on a child's bed in Beverly Hills, while the world outside continued in its ordinary way, not yet knowing what had happened. In the hours that followed, Priscilla did something that surprised the people around her. Instead of getting immediately on a plane to Memphis, which is what everyone expected, what protocol demanded, what the logistics of death and grief and funeral arrangements required, she asked to have a few hours alone. She drove to a small Catholic church in Los Angeles. She sat in the back for 45 minutes. She did not pray, she would say later, in the way people expect prayer to look. She simply sat in the quiet and let the quiet be something. She had converted to Scientology years earlier. Elvis had always been deeply religious, but in his own way, the way of someone who grew up in a Pentecostal church and carried God with him always, tucked behind the performance, beneath the jumpsuits, underneath everything. Priscilla's faith had traveled its own road, but grief takes you back to the places where you learned what the world was, and she had learned what the world was in churches. So that afternoon, she sat in one. A priest came and sat beside her after a while. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. He simply sat. And that sitting beside her, that quiet presence, was more useful than anything else anyone did for her that day. Before she flew to Memphis that evening, Priscilla sat down at a desk in her house and wrote a letter. She wrote it by hand, on regular paper, in her own handwriting. She wrote it to Elvis. She has never revealed what the letter said. She has acknowledged writing it once, in passing, in a conversation that a friend recounted years later. She wrote it and sealed it, and then she held it for a moment, and then she put it away somewhere. Not mailed, not sent, not shared, just written. There are things you need to say to someone, even when they can no longer hear you, maybe especially then, because the words aren't really for the other person, they are for you. They are the things that have been living in you for years without a shape, and grief gives them a shape. And you put the shape down on paper, and it doesn't fix anything, but it makes the thing real. It makes it something you can hold in your hands instead of just feel pressing against the inside of your chest. Priscilla flew to Memphis that evening. She landed to a world that had already begun to transform the crowds gathering outside Graceland, the news trucks on Elvis Presley Boulevard, the radio stations playing his songs without interruption, the particular communal grief that happens when someone who belonged to everyone suddenly doesn't exist anymore. She moved through it with the composure she had always shown in public. The same composure that had gotten her through the years of being Elvis's wife, the smiling at events she hadn't chosen to attend, the holding herself together in rooms full of people who all wanted something from her proximity to greatness. But those who were close to her say the composure cost more than it ever had before. The funeral was August 18th. Priscilla stood at the graveside in white. She did not cry in public. She held Lisa Marie's hand. She greeted the people who came, dignitaries and musicians and ordinary fans who had somehow gotten past the gates with the same steady warmth she had always shown. She was, in every visible way, exactly what the moment required of her. What the moment required of her, privately, was something else, entirely. A friend who was with her at Graceland in those days said that the nights were the hardest, that during the day Priscilla functioned, she organized, she made decisions, she protected Lisa Marie. She was present. But late at night, when the house finally quieted and the obligations of grief had been temporarily discharged, she would sit alone in whatever room she happened to be in, and she would be very still. And sometimes she would simply look at her hands, the way someone looks at their hands when they are trying to remember something they are afraid they will forget. Elvis Presley died on August 16th, 1977. He was 42 years old. He left behind a daughter, a catalog of music that will outlast everything, and the woman who had been the closest thing to a home he ever had outside of his mother's arms. Priscilla Presley is still alive. She is 79 years old. She has spent 48 years living in the shadow of a legend she helped create and had to survive. She has given thousands of interviews. She has written a memoir. She has appeared at events and openings and tributes and memorials. She has done more than almost anyone to keep Elvis's memory alive and complicated and human. But the letter she wrote on August 16th, 1977, before she flew to Memphis, before the world took over, that letter has never been seen. It sits somewhere in a private place, sealed. The last private thing. The words she couldn't say when he was alive, and couldn't stop herself from saying when he was gone. Nobody knows what is in it. Maybe that is the point. Maybe some things belong only to the two people involved, even when one of them is no longer there to receive the message, and even when the whole world thinks it owns the story. The love between Elvis Presley and Priscilla Presley was not a simple thing. It was not a fairy tale, and it was not a tragedy, though it contained elements of both. It was the story of two people who found each other too young and held on too long and let go too late and never fully stopped. The story of a man who could fill stadiums but couldn't fill a house with the ordinary warmth of a present husband. The story of a woman who remade herself entirely for one person and then had to discover who she was when that person was gone. It is, in other words, a human story. As human as they come. And on August 16th, 1977, in a house in Beverly Hills, with a 9-year-old in the next room, and the whole world about to descend, Priscilla Presley had 3 minutes of silence before she had to hold everyone else together. 3 minutes that nobody filmed, nobody recorded, nobody saw, but they happened. They are as real as anything that followed. And somewhere, In a sealed envelope, in a private place, the words she wrote that evening are still waiting. For no one, for everyone. For him. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that the people we think we know are always more than we can see, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. What do you think Priscilla wrote in that letter? What would you have written? The notification bell is right there. Ring it, because the most important stories are never the ones the world was watching.